Hello, everybody, and welcome on in to our first Late Nighter Roundtable for October of 2025. My name is Jon Schneider from LateNighter, and I'm so excited to be with you for this month and hopefully every month moving forward to talk about the biggest stories that are happening right now throughout the late night universe. And we have two of our late night experts with us to talk through all of the major storylines from the last month. So, first, let's bring in the editor at large for LateNighter, and that is Bill Carter. Bill, how are you?
I'm good. Everybody looks good. So great to be with you guys.
Great to be with you, Bill. Always excited to hear your thoughts on everything we got going on. So, looking forward to our discussion today. And joining us as well is one of the great late night minds there is, an expert in all things Johnny Carson and late night, and that is Mark Malkoff. Mark, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having us, John.
Of course, happy to be here. So let's dive right in and talk about what we saw in October of 2025. Clearly, the biggest story coming into the month was Kimmel's suspension and him returning. He had just returned during the final week of September and then would head to Brooklyn for a week of shows at the start of October. We had appearances from Colbert, Jon Stewart, Seth Meyers, and this grand return for Jimmy Kimmel to get on the air. Bill, I'd love to know from you, do you think that Kimmel bounced back from what was a pretty rough September?
Bounce back. I don't think he's ever bounced higher right now. No, I think he got tremendous support, not just in the late night community, but in the country. And it seems to be he seems to be riding that wave. I mean, you watch his show now, and the people are there. They're not just there to laugh; they're there to cheer. They feel like he stood up, and they admire him for it. So I think he's come out of it on a very positive note. But of course, the future is anybody's guess.
It's fascinating. And I sort of just like threw the softball there for you to hit out of the park because I agree. I think that what I've seen from watching Kimmel over the last month is that the crowd is going wild. There's this sort of Jerry Springer-esque thing where he comes out for the monologue and people are cheering, Jimmy, Jimmy. So, Mark, it is very incredible in what was, sort of like a little bit of a mystery in September about how this whole thing would resolve itself, that Jimmy's in the place that he is in right now at the end of October.
It's unbelievable. I mean, for late night to get this much attention and for there to be that much energy and attention, I really wish that late night would get this much attention overall, but it had to just take really big circumstances. But I think Bill and maybe John would agree as well. I think a lot of us, including Jimmy, didn't think he was going to be back. I mean, I knew people at the show, I talked to them, and I think a lot of people were like, it's over with. So for this to happen and for Jimmy to triumph like this, I mean, it's rocky. I mean, it's unbelievable what that guy has accomplished and the momentum of his show. I can't imagine him not continuing with the show after his contract. I really, really can't the way he's going.
I will say I did not agree with people who said he wouldn't be back because I thought he would be back. The reason I thought he would be back was because, at least from his point of view, he doesn't give in. This guy does have a spine, that's for sure. But the other thing is, I think people underestimated the weakness of the affiliates who were trying to pull him off the air. They cannot survive without their network. So as long as ABC was not going to cave, and so the ball was sort of in their court. But I felt like particularly Iger had a lot on the line reputationally, and I thought he's not going to just fold this tent. And the fact that they were talking about it made me think he's not going to. Now it was certainly uncomfortable, and there was a lot of pressure. And I think Jimmy thought it was over at one point. I think he did think it was over, but I had a suspicion that these affiliate groups that were pulling him off would go back very quickly to put him on, and you notice they did because I think they have like a contract that says they can preempt 5 times, and then they're threatened by losing their affiliation. Well, that would be a disaster for them because imagine a local station right now without a network affiliation.
Without football is the
Without
big
football, without
thing.
sports, without college football, that is a very big loss. So they had some leverage, but I still think it all came down to Jimmy not knuckling under.
I know that the Kimmel story was somewhat compared to what happened to Jack Parr back in the day, and there was that homage of, as I was saying before I was interrupted, when
Yes.
Kimmel does return, which was a great, great moment for late night overall. But well, have we seen anything like this in the late night universe ever? A redemption story that you could sort of talk about, like a guy who wasn't getting maybe the attention he deserves, and now he's thrust himself into the spotlight?
Conan. I mean, like I will say, Conan is not back in late night, but he's never been bigger. That's for sure. That strikes me as an example of somebody who has risen above his unfair demise, I guess you might say. But I mean, the situation has never been like this. This was governmental pressure. The only comparison is the Smothers Brothers, which wasn't a late night show, but that was a show forced off the air because of its politics. So that was a comparison, and they did go off the air. In fact, they sued and everything, but they were never the same. They were never the same after they lost their show. So what also makes it interesting is that Jimmy has been hinting that he's considering leaving the show for now maybe 2 contract cycles. So there was that overhanging the situation. What was his feeling about going forward? And I wrote about this today because I feel like I don't know that he has a choice anymore. I mean, I think he has to do it. I mean, I think he can't now say, "Well, I've made my point. I'm really tired of doing the show, so I'm going to bow out." I think that would the point I made is he had an obligation to his family because his family is all hired on the show. He's carrying all these family members on the show. And he used to say to me, I can't quit. My whole family will go broke. All my cousins and relatives will go broke. So he does. But now his constituency is bigger. It's like the whole part of the country that doesn't like what's happening to Trump is now depending on him to stand up.
Bill, not only that, I really think that Jimmy realizes and we realize if he leaves and decides to leave, there's not going to be a replacement in late night. This is the
Well,
end of network television, late night show as we see it. I mean, Byron Allen has kind of figured out that what probably, if it does come back, it's going to be the new metrics, which is you do a much cheaper, scaled down version of what we've been seeing. But once Kimmel leaves, that's never coming. I could be off, but I can't see network television coming back like that with a late night show and having that budget.
it's interesting. It would leave Fallon, right? So it would leave the Tonight Show. It would like move us back 30,
Where we
40
started.
years
Yeah,
until we had
true.
one show, and you would think if there's interest in late night, and there seems to be enough interest that they sign up for YouTube channels, etc., then one standalone show would have a chance to keep going. And after all, Trump has attacked Fallon as well, but clearly not in the same terms as Colbert and Kimmel. And Fallon is not irritating him nightly. So there would be that advantage. But I think it's interesting, and I suppose we'll get to this point, but that Fallon is not doing great now. He does very well digitally, but in terms of subs, but his ratings tend to be third now, which belies the idea that avoiding politics is the way to go.
So let's put a pin in that, Bill, because I want to talk about that. And I just have a couple of more Kimmel questions for you
Yeah.
both. So, first is you brought up the contract. You have a great piece on Late Nighter right now talking about Kimmel's contract and the potential of them renewing it and him wanting to return. The major question that I have is did Trump and the administration and the FCC potentially extend the lifetime of Kimmel's show by doing what they did?
Yes, I think that's a big fat yes. Um, I think Mark's point is interesting because let's say none of this happened and Kimmel just decided, I've had enough, I'm leaving. Would he have been replaced by ABC? I don't know. I don't know what their feeling is about the whole late night idea. So this has thrown that all completely up in the air. And I think it has extended it. I think one of the interesting questions is what kind of renewal does Kimmel get and what kind of renewal does Stewart get? Do they get a 1-year renewal? Let's just see what happens in 1 year. Or does the network, ABC in this case, I think, make a statement and say, no, we want to give Jimmy a 3-year deal if Jimmy will take it. that would be the statement that we're absolutely committed to staying in late night. And for Comedy Central, it's the same thing. I don't know what Comedy Central does without the Daily Show. They have one show. Then they have South Park. There's
I
nothing
do
else.
want to mention, and I don't think that this has really been talked much in the media. I don't know if at all. There was a point when Letterman at CBS and Craig Ferguson, when they were the producers, and I think maybe even some of the hosts had to take cuts. They were taking cuts in salary. It was like a third, and it would affected both shows. So I don't know what kind of stuff is going on behind the scenes, but for them to make a contract, if that is even on the table for somebody to take less money, but it could be.
It obviously could be Mark. They look what they've done with Seth Meyers. I mean, they've basically gotten rid of every extraneous thing they can. They tape 2 shows in one day now to try to cut back as well. So yeah, I can see a lot of the driving motivation now is let's get the costs under control. But I think it's pretty interesting that the Daily Show numbers are up. I think that's kind of interesting. That makes me think, if late night keeps on this, on the story of the moment, they have a chance to kind of catch a little fire with younger viewers. That's where they're up. They're up with the 18 to 49 audience. So I was shocked by that. I didn't think they even turned on a television set. So that surprises me.
And besides Kimmel's monologue when he returned, which I think was a fascinating moment for late night television in general, I think that Jon Stewart's night at the Daily Show, where he showed up and the whole set was painted in gold and he was kowtowing to Trump for half an hour, I think was some of the most brilliant late night comedy I've seen in a long time. So if I'm going to recommend something for our viewers for the last couple of months to go back and watch, I definitely recommend that. I think another interesting angle here that I want to ask the two of you about is the support from the other late night hosts. This has been a well-publicized story going back to COVID and Strikeforce 5 about how close these late night hosts are. But we saw it in July after the Colbert cancellation on July 21st when you saw, Anderson Cooper, Andy Cohen, Jimmy Fallon, Seth Meyers, all show up. John Oliver, Jon Stewart, all showed up to Colbert's show after the cancellation to support him. And then you had all of these hosts showing up in Brooklyn for Kimmel and them coming out. And we're hearing about Fallon and Kimmel's fishing trips and all of this. It is just a completely different world than what we were in going back 20 years. And
Yeah.
I find it so fascinating at this time with all the things that are going on that everyone's coming out of the woodwork to support each other, Bill.
On one level, it really stinks, John, because it was much better for guys like me when there was an actual conflict. But it is interesting, and it's only been, deepened by they're all lumped together in Trump's split enemy list. They all feel the heat from him, and I think they all feel like it's a survival mode. So they're all, it's interesting. When I used to watch Strikeforce 5, you could sort of see that maybe Fallon wasn't quite as in it with the other guys. It seemed like they were very nice to him and all that, but there was a little bit of an edge to that, I thought. And I find it fascinating because I think he's stylistically quite different from the other guys. He really is. But this is like a brotherhood now. This is who they are. They're late night hosts. They have the same basic function, same tribulations. Let's get a show on every day. Let's run a staff. Let's pick writers. All that they share with themselves and virtually nobody else on the planet. So it's a unique situation that they're in.
Mark, what do you think of all these late night hosts and the way that they support each other?
I just think the culture shift. I remember 25, 30 years ago on Saturday Night Live, people would criticize one another, cast members, they would say negative things about one another. And then if you look at the Shales, James Andrew Miller book, it stops generationally. I think it's a different generation where everybody, I'm sure that it is real that they're all friendly with one another, but it seems very generational that they are not going to say anything negative and everybody's friends. I just think it's a different generation where that is just much more common and accepted, where back in the day, it was not like that.
To me, it's probably because they have no prospects eating at their heels, it makes it easier when you have no one in line to take over the throne of your show. It makes it easier to bond with your competitors. It's like people going to a bar and you've seen them and you're like, oh, I've seen you at that table. And eventually you start talking to them.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think if there was someone in line and waiting to take over the Tonight Show, take over Late Night, take over Kimmel, I think that there's more pressure on these hosts to, put their foot down on what they do. But besides external factors, I think that the hosts have gotten very comfortable.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And one of the interesting developments is that the young comics who in the past would have two paths to, big stardom. One would be a sitcom, if you broke in a major sitcom, and the other was to host a late night show. You now have hosts like what's her name from After Midnight,
Taylor Tomlinson.
who decides not to do it because she'd much rather tour and be a stand up. And they can do way, way better financially now than they used to be able to do.
Even
So it's
Conan.
the only goal to get out there and be so you don't have, John is correct, you don't have this lineup of guys or girls now saying, I got to get that shot. That's why I got to get that shot. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting that Josh Johnson, who I think is emerged as a real big stand up in his generation, I mean, really big, he is, and when I interviewed him, he said he was interested in being the host of Daily Show eventually, which I think kind of goes against the trend.
It's interesting. I mean, Mark, you recently interviewed Roy Wood Jr. and talked to him about, leaving the Daily Show. And he was somebody who, clearly, a lot of viewers thought that there was a big future for him there. He now is at CNN hosting Have I Got News for You? But when you have a big prospect like that, like somebody like Josh Johnson, how do you start predicting if they'll take that mantle in the future, or are you comfortable where you are with them right now?
I just think it just takes a few years and how hot they are. Michael Che, how long was he at the Daily Show before the talent is talent? And Lorne Michaels is like, we want this guy. And you're doing a basic cable show, which is highly watched and it's great. But when you're that talented, like he is, and I'm not saying Roy Wood Jr. isn't, Roy Wood Jr. said that, he just saw the writing on the wall basically. And I think he's in a much better place. Come on, doing a show once a week and having your own name on the show is great. I was going to say with Conan, for example, I mean, he's works way less than all the late night shows doing his podcast. And is probably making more money per year than all of them, I'm guessing. I mean, just the model, everything is just changed a lot.
So let's talk about Fallon. We mentioned him earlier and how he's steered clear of a lot of the political action that's gone on with these other shows. I, think back to something that we covered on Late Nighter a couple weeks ago when he was promoting On Brand and he had an interview on MSNBC and he said, well, my show isn't really political. And it was sort of interesting that he came out and said that, given the talk about everything that was happening with all of the other late night shows. And certainly, I know that everyone who watches all the late night shows has opinions about Jimmy Fallon and finds him pretty polarizing. But I think he's fascinating personally because I think that what he's done, especially in the last month, as all the other shows have addressed, politics, everything that's happening with Trump, freedom of speech. He's had Taylor Swift. He's had the K-pop Demon Hunters, the singers. He's tried to get the biggest stars in the world to come on his show. And I think, Bill, back to when Taylor Swift was on his show a couple weeks ago and said, the reason I come here and I don't go other places is because you make the show fun. And is that worth something nowadays that we're watching what's happening around late night TV and he's still the fun guy?
I think that's his brand. I don't think he can do the other stuff well. So he's doing the right thing. Jimmy's a really talented guy. I mean, he can do so many things. I mean, he really is. He's a super talented guy. So, he's playing the cards that he has in his hand. I think that's wise because when he does do, and the top of his monologue is often a couple of jokes about whatever's going on with Trump, they just go by. They don't, they don't really land because it's not his thing. And so I think I would never say he should change because when he tried the whole thing with Trump before that blew up in his face and he wanted to apologize, that was all, he was uncomfortable in that space. And I think he's very comfortable in this space. The question I have is that it isn't the same as it used to be when Johnny would not have point of view politics, but he did plenty of politics. It just wasn't point of view politics. He would make pretty potent jokes about whoever was the politician of the day worth making fun of. He just wasn't going to expose a point of view about it. He might sneak in a little, but it wasn't. And he could do that because he was really skillful. I think right now you have a figure who is just either revered or reviled. There's nothing else in between.
Right.
And so it's very hard to walk the line like that. And I don't think it is scoring like it could for Fallon, because if you look at what turns up on YouTube, it's the monologue, and they will say on their thing that Jimmy says this joke. It's the Trump thing. They kind of, even though he's not doing it much on the air, because it's clickbait. Oh, there's a Trump thing going on. It's still, there's something a little more edgy about that, and Jimmy doesn't do edgy really. So he's. I think he's got to do what he's got to do, but I'm not sure it works tremendously for him right now, because it ought to be, if you listen to people who said, I'm sick of politics, I'm sick of them doing Trump jokes, I'm sick of it, then he should be dominating, because he's the one that's avoiding that. But that isn't the case, because I think it's still a show on that night, and the people who are watching are still a little attuned to what's gone on today. That was certainly why the top of Johnny's monologue was so effective. He was on top of that all the time. And it feels like Jimmy will do it, but he's not committed to it. And that's a big difference.
I don't know why Jimmy can't do like cold opens as Trump, and you know how so many people at SNL, when they did presidents, they can still do it in a way that's if he doesn't want to show his politics or be respectful, there he can still he does a great Trump. They
Yeah,
can do it. It's all execution and it's all the point of view.
you're right. And Mark, you're right, because not everything Trump does is political. Some of it is just goofy, right? Some of it is just buffoonish and silly and goofy. And you can always do that, because that's safe territory, really. You can always do that. You don't have to have him, insulting women or whatever. You know what I mean? He can be walking around in Japan yesterday looking like he's lost. You can do that, and Jimmy, if he does a Trump thing, he can fall into the impression instantly, because he does it well. But you're right. I think a cold open would be a great idea. Anything that's different right now, I think, is a great idea in late night. Anything that's different and fresh, I think, is a great idea.
I think the thing for Fallon is that for me, it always depends how you define success. Clearly, there's been decades of defining success in late night as ratings. But I find, speaking to a lot of younger people who are big Saturday Night Live fans and watch some of Fallon and Seth, that they stick with the NBC shows, but they stick specifically with Fallon because they get short clips of him playing games with their favorite celebrities and having conversations about their projects and learning more about their favorite movies and TV shows. They don't want to see him playing Trump. And it's been fascinating as I was doing late night last night for the last month over at LateNighter, talking to some of the SNL fans to tell them that I was doing this, and then they would say, "Well, I don't really watch Colbert or Kimmel. I actually watch Fallon. Like, he's the one that comes to my algorithm." And, because they're not seeking these shows out necessarily, they're waiting for the shows to come to them. And Fallon has found a way to bring his show to the people.
But number wise, he has more digital subscribers by far than the other guys. But viewership, if you look at the number of views he gets, is very low. So he's not really capturing that. He's not getting people to say, I got to see the game that Jimmy Fallon played with the guest. Because, it doesn't surprise me, because if you're watching and you happen to be watching, it's kind of fun. But would you go out of your way to see that? Him doing a word game with somebody, it doesn't feel like something you think about and say, oh, I got to see Jimmy Fallon do that. He really would be better, I think, in an era when you kind of watch the show as it happens, because he is fun, and he would be sort of a fun thing to look at. I think it's harder for him to translate to discernible viewing, where you say, I'm going to watch that because I got to see Jon Stewart do X. I'm watching Jon Stewart because I know he does this spectacular thing tonight.
Fallon could do two things that I think would get up the ratings and help energize the show. One, go back to doing pre-tapes, the parodies that he did that people missed. I do understand that he's a father, he's married, and I know that the time that it probably takes to put that stuff in, that might be an issue. The second thing is, telling you, Seth Meyers is doing the 2 shows in one day these days. Jimmy, and I've said this before, should go up to 8H and make that his permanent home Monday through Wednesday. Do a double on one of those days because they're only doing Monday through Thursday. Double the audience out there is going to give them so much energy. Leno with the thrust stage in '94 when he went out there revolutionized the Tonight Show. Jay, that was the catalyst that really set that for Leno to go back to Burbank, and it just changed the show. I think it can't hurt at least them going up to 8H and trying that in Monday through Wednesday doing the Tonight Show there.
But I have to. You're making an excellent point. And what I really miss about Fallon was he would do sketches. He would do creative stuff. He would do mom dancing with Michelle Obama. He would do slow jamming the news. Right? He's not doing any of that.
Those are the bits that people miss.
His own show he did thank you notes. It was the first time he did it in like 6 months. He doesn't do the signature bits that he did before. And as you're observing, it could be that he wants to be a father or whatever. Except then he's running off and doing On Brand and Password and all of the rest of it. His focus is not only on the Tonight Show and being creative on the Tonight Show.
Don't you think there's a chance that NBC, with ratings and everything, that's part of their we don't know their contracts, that's part of keeping their show, that they have to do other double duty? I mean, Jimmy's hosting Millionaire, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. We don't know behind the scenes if, like, for them to keep doing their shows and getting their salaries, they have to maybe double up and do some other things. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. But, I mean, it just feels, is the on-brand thing valuable for Jimmy Fallon's career?
I get the impression that maybe it's just something he's interested in. I think he's always had the fascination with marketing. And you see that with the shoe deals and the ice cream and all that stuff that he's done over the years, that I feel like this is something that maybe he's doing for him. But
right.
I agree.
John, that's my point. He's doing that instead of the stuff that Mark and I just talked about. He's not doing the stuff that would make the Tonight Show a little more exciting.
And I'm a bit of a Fallon defender, but I will say that, at least in the last month,
I like him too.
I'm not saying you don't. That's the fun debate here, is that I'm not saying that you don't like him, but I will say, look, he did go to Detroit. He's doing the NFL Sunday lead-in shows. So I think those are things. When he was in Detroit, he did a lip-sync battle with Keegan-Michael Key. I think that was something that people were excited that he brought back. He is bringing back some old bits, which I think helps. The thank you notes, the hashtags that he completely went away from when Twitter turned to X. So I think that those are things that work. He last week did a sketch with Charlie Puth. So I see a little bit more of an effort. Maybe it isn't exactly the way it was in 2015 or 2016, but I think that he's doing a little more. And I think that the bookings for Fallon have been unbelievable.
Absolutely.
I don't know that we can say this is because of Fallon specifically, but whoever, the booking department that are getting the biggest stars in the world to come to his show, every day there's somebody on there that's A-list compared to the other shows.
I just don't know why. And I've mentioned this to some people over there, that Johnny Carson, his first 10 years at The Tonight Show, the writers and the talent coordinators would prepare Johnny's ad-libs, possible ad-libs for all the interviews. Sometimes Carson went on his own. Sometimes he had ad-libs. And I don't know why they wouldn't have the 20-plus writers that they have at Fallon try that with Jimmy, and they don't. And I just think with his interviewing sometimes, I don't know why they wouldn't try something like that. I just think that would help the interviews a little bit, but I don't know, that's just me.
I do want to stress, because I actually have had a very good relationship with Fallon. And when he was really on the outs, I happened to run into him in LA, and we had a really long conversation that he still remembers. And I'm fond of the guy on a personal level, actually. But I think he's really talented, and I think he's kind of drawn back from that a little bit. That's sort of when he was first on, it was electric and fascinating that he was doing something different, and it was full of energy. That Mark made the energy point. It was really full of energy. And I just feel like that's not really quite there now. And for whatever reason, and it could be, because I think the guy can, grab a guitar and be Bob Dylan, he just can do that, or Springsteen.
Or Sandler. Yeah, he's amazing.
He's an actual amazing impressionist, actually. And, I said to him once, I saw you do this, and did you have to work to get in? He said, no, I could do it for you right now. And he just could jump right into an impression. To me, is unreal. So I find that a little frustrating when I watch him. That I'd like to see more of him doing what he's great at.
Fair enough. All right, let's pivot to Saturday Night Live. This is the first month for season 51 of SNL, taking place in the same building as Fallon. And when we enter the month, a lot of questions were being asked about how SNL would address everything that was happening in late night with freedom of speech. Kimmel was in Brooklyn at the time. Would Kimmel show up? Would Colbert show up? None of that happened. And we went on status quo as usual. I mean, there was some fun stuff in the opening with, Colin Jost, Pete Hegseth, but we didn't get to see any addressing of what was happening in the late night universe. Even last week, there was a lot of talk about the No Kings marches. SNL went with Domingo as the cold open. It really seems like they are avoiding doing major political talk right now on Saturday Night Live. And I would love to know from the two of you how you feel about how SNL has opened up their season and how they've addressed some of these things. Mark, I'll start with you on this one.
I don't think they've really addressed anything. I mean, the host has so much say, and I could see Sabrina Carpenter wanting to do a Domingo cold open, and just the metrics of 20 million people on YouTube watching Domingo, even though I've seen it and I feel like it's run its course. I feel like they haven't addressed it. I mean, they've done a little bit. I was very surprised, but I like the show. I think the ladies are stealing the show. I really do. I think that they're doing a great job, but I don't feel like it's been that much addressed. Do you, Bill?
Not at all. And I felt like, well, Domingo is not a sketch that works for me anyway. But okay, you should use it. Again, you have a big singing star on. Of course, you should use it. But first of all, very rarely is the host in a cold open. Very rarely, right?
Yeah.
That's a rarity. So you can do Domingo anytime in the show. You don't have to do it at the cold open. You have. And I think you have an expectation now that Saturday Night Live is going to do some kind of satirical thing as it's cold open, something that everybody's thinking about in the news. And it looks like they avoided that. They're like, let's not do it, And with the atmosphere that we have, with efforts to mute these shows and threats about what can happen to ownership, and ownership deciding to invest in ripping down the East Wing or whatever, there's questions that are going to pop up like, well, why didn't they do this obvious thing? They just had the No Kings March. There's no idea. Nobody has a funny idea about that.
I will say Update has done a good job. Update has done a very good job, and I think that's the part of the show that's addressed it. But you would expect the viewers expect a cold open, and when it's not there, that's leaves questions.
There's nothing about Domingo that says cold open to me. It's a recurring sketch, right? It's been on many, many times. It can appear anywhere in the show. It doesn't make any sense to me as a cold open. I just felt like either they were avoiding, or they wrote something and it failed, because that could happen. That has happened in the past. The cold open they and it just bombs, and they say, well, Domingo will work. Let's put that in. I don't know if they did that or not, but I was so disappointed by that. It turned me off to the show. That entire episode, I was like, come on. And I didn't think it was a good episode, frankly. And I like her. I think she's talented and a very appealing personality.
I think the younger people that were tuning in, Sabrina Carpenter fans, probably wanted that, and it probably wasn't for us. I think Polar had the best show as number 2. I thought Sabrina Carpenter was was the next runner-up in terms of the writing, and she was an effortless host. And then the season premiere. Why does season premiere so hard sometimes? Bad Bunny was great. I thought the writing was just okay. But
yeah,
I
thought this week was by far the weakest. But you see, the ratings weren't very good either this week, which shocked me. I thought they would be with her as the host. I thought they would be, but I don't know. To me, it's interesting because I don't know what you guys. You're more expert maybe in the actual way the show works historically, but it seems like when they have a show that comes on after a break, it isn't that good. And then a couple of weeks in, there's a really good one. Like they have to get into some sort of a rhythm. So I was really looking forward to the third one for that reason, that they might have hit a stride. But another thing that bothers me, and I have to say this, it really isn't relevant to that show so much, is how can you do this show without a black woman in the show, in the cast? I mean, how can you do it? When I saw that they're not replacing Ego, I was like, what's going to happen if there's Jasmine Crockett or somebody is really prominent. What are you going to do? Bring back another old cast member? That's all you can do. I found that really shocking, and it really puts the burden, I think, on Chloe Fineman and Sarah Sherman. They have some of the new people are starting to emerge, but it just felt like that was a big mistake. I don't know what you guys
Yeah,
think.
Veronica is incredible. Her and Ashley are incredible. But yeah, I thought and John can probably speak more to this. Ego leaving seemed like that it was a last minute surprise that they didn't know she was leaving. But I'm in agreement. They need to cast someone. She was so good at what
So
she
good.
did. I mean,
So
I really, really miss her on the show.
100%. That is something that I'm sure SNL is trying to address. I don't think it was something that they were prepared for. They did hire two Black women writers. I know Joe Sunday was just in a pre-tape in the Sabrina Carpenter episode, so it is possible that something does materialize there. I think that everybody who's watching the show feels exactly the same way as you do, Bill. So to me, it's just a matter of time for them to figure this out. But I think that Lorne isn't the type to be pressured into a decision. So I think that
no,
he's
you're right about that, John.
yeah. So I think that he's probably waiting for the person that he feels, probably should be on that cast. As far as the, Domingo cold open and all of that stuff. So I believe that was still the cold open in dress. I think that was something that reminds me a lot of what's happening in Fallon. Like, I think that there's some synergy there where that they're trying to build this show and the future of this show to be for the algorithm, for people to find the show in that way. And people who are searching Sabrina Carpenter, all of the fans who are not staying up to 11:30 at night, the first thing they're going to see when they wake up in the morning is Domingo. So it's just a matter of, how they're choosing to build their show and who the show is really for at this point. So I do think that that's a large part of the decision-making process here. I think, Mark, you said something really interesting, which is that you feel like Jost and Shay are doing a really good job on Update, handling a lot of the political humor. Why is that? Why do you think that they're doing such a great job?
I just think that their point of view is just it's so refreshing. I feel like maybe after what Norm Macdonald was doing on Update, it's probably the edgiest update that I've seen, and I just think it's the one thing I hear from people that watch the show, that regardless if they like the episode or not, that I consistently will say I like that Update. I always love Update, and it's rare that they disappoint. I just think they're very consistent. I think the writing is really, really solid. And there's just something about the two of them and their chemistry that I think it's consistently some of the strongest part of the show.
What's interesting is that even when the show isn't working for me, I always laugh at Update. Like, there's always laughs in Update. It almost doesn't matter. They're going to have very good jokes that they're going to deliver, and they have a rapport now that really works. So it's very dependable, and it's really essential, because you might be watching the show and thinking it's lagging, and then that comes on, and you definitely laugh. So that they earn the laugh for sure.
My final topic on Saturday Night Live for the first month, as we go through, generally things that are happening at the show during each month, is that prior to the season, Lorne spoke with Puck and mentioned that there was going to be some changes at the show. A lot of the media interpreted that as a major shakeup. We ended up losing a lot of cast members, including Ego that we spoke to, and we ended up hiring 5 new cast members. So there certainly is some fresh feeling to the people we're seeing on screen. But is it enough for you guys that the show feels a lot different right now into 51 versus what we saw last year in 50?
I'm going to say I think 51 has less energy than last year. I think it's inevitable. I think that was something that was going to happen no matter what, even if they had hired 10 new people or no new people. I've been fortunate to write about the show forever, and I've talked to Lorne forever. And the show has to do this. It has to go through cycles. It can't continue without changing up its style and its cast. So this is another edition of that for me. Like, okay, well, we'll see. I don't know the full depth of the talent that they have there. I don't know. I trust Michaels because he's got an eye like nobody who's ever been in show business for this. But it takes time. I mean, I don't think, I remember when Kate McKinnon was in the cast for the first time. The first few episodes, I didn't know who she was. And then she appeared once on Weekend Update, and I happened to be writing a thing about the show that week, and you can probably remember the bit. She was playing the artist who messed up the painting in Italy, right?
Of course.
And I went to the Friday night run through this, and I saw this, and I said, "Holy shit, did that kill?" And that is going to kill. She was so good. I was amazed by it, and I'm like, okay, that was in her. I didn't know that was in her, you know. So all of a sudden, then she becomes a big honking star. So you don't know about that. You don't know necessarily who's going to be the person, and until they get their feet wet. And some of them disappoint. You know, some of them they hire them, and you don't see them for 2 years, and they're gone. You know, but I kind of have faith that over the long term, the stars will emerge because they always have.
Mark, I feel like that's what we're seeing right now, where the major topic of conversation in the SNL streets is about Ashley Padilla as being the potential star of the show. She had a huge month. She had the two probably most talked about sketches in week number 1 and week number 3. In week number 2, she was in 8 sketches. It's been back to back to back weeks of greatness from Ashley. Is she SNL's next star?
She's absolutely phenomenal. I think Veronica also, I mean, from being in just a few episodes, I mean, I just can't even imagine where she's going to take the show. I think that they're absolutely phenomenal, but I'll say this, and I said it before, I really hope it stays an ensemble. And it became the Kate McKinnon show, became the Kristen Wiig show, and it was the Will Ferrell show. And the show works the best in terms of the writing when it's still an ensemble. You can maybe have somebody, a utility person, maybe they put a little bit more than everyone else in if it's necessary, but please keep it balanced playing field. I hope so, but I think Ashley's phenomenal. I really do.
I think she's great. I think she's great. I wish they hadn't used her in an extended fart joke. That to me just doesn't work.
Steve Higgins has to do his customary sound effects.
That just to me is talk about the lowest form of humor. That's just the lowest.
Agreed. Except, the fact that she was able to pull it off as successfully as she did, it goes to
Yes.
show, this is a potentially great situation that we're seeing here with somebody like Ashley. And I tend to agree with you, Mark. I think that some of my favorite moments in the history of Saturday Night Live have been with ensemble casts. But at a certain point, the cream does rise to the top. And I think if you have a cast member that is significantly stronger than the others, then as Lauren, as the producers, you have no choice but to showcase them. So the question is will the rest of the cast rise up to the level that Ashley has been producing in these first 3 episodes? I think that's something we're going to look forward to in November. Bill, I want to jump to you and talk to you about Byron Allen, who you spoke to at Adweek. One of the major stories that we were talking about over at LateNighter was him potentially wanting Colbert's slot once he leaves the show. So what do you think is going to happen there?
Well, I saved to ask him that for the end of the interview, right? Because I thought I don't want to totally, but I thought he would dodge and weave it, but he didn't. He said, "Yeah, of course I want to do that. Of course, that's my goal." So I thought, well, okay, well that's kind of newsworthy. He is a guy who doesn't really have. He's not an entertainer anymore. He started out but he's not an entertainer. He's a business guy looking to build his empire or something, and it's a weird empire. You don't know why he put these various parts together. Why he has the Weather Channel and sports from historically back colleges, and it's just a bunch of things. But this formula that he has clearly kind of worked because he's hooked into this. He first hooked into the stations and what they needed. Right? They need programming. He said, "I'll give it to you for nothing. I'll give you programming for nothing. Just give me ad spots and I'll give you programming for nothing." And they're like, "Okay, go ahead, go on the air." And then he devises a format where he can run the sprockets off the thing. The comics are telling jokes they told 12 years ago on its reruns, but he makes it completely non-topical and non-political and, not really edgy. And it fills time. It's just a time filler. There's no special reason to watch the show. And what happens when that goes into 11:30? I mean, I guess it's the same thing as now. He has a newish show which just goes into the machine and then gets replayed again, and presumably we'll see it in 10 years or something. And it's a formula. It's a formula for entertainment. It's not an entertainment plan. It's a formula plan.
Mark, I feel like the insiders of late nights find this fascinating with Byron Allen, but will anybody care if he does take over the Colbert slot?
Not really. I mean, I don't think so. I mean, Byron Allen is a student of late night. He definitely has great respect for late night. I mean, he talks about every comedian that does Johnny Carson has two birthdays. One is their Carson debut and their real birthday. He has the suit framed. Bill, you were with me in Byron's office. He has that suit when he wore on
Oh,
Johnny's
I
debut.
wasn't with you, but I have been
Great.
in his. Were you in the office that day? Yes, you
Yeah, he
were. Yeah,
produced the show.
yeah,
You won a Webby.
yeah,
So did
yeah.
I. Um,
You were there that day.
yeah, I was there. I
So
was
yes,
there.
he has it in his in a huge frame, the
Yeah,
jacket.
he has the suit frame. So he's a student of late night. I think this was always been an ambition of his. And I just think economically he's figured out. They do like 5 tapings in a day, right? And there's soundstage in Culver City.
6. He
6
did 6.
statements. I think maybe if you move to 11:30, maybe he still gets some really good guests. Maybe the caliber if you're 11:30, maybe people are promoting things. Maybe some of the bigger names will show
You
up.
won't get anybody promoting something, Mark, because the thing will be
Oh,
long
evergreen
gone.
because it has to be
It has to
evergreen.
be evergreen.
Yeah, it has to be evergreen.
But it's a weird thing. But he scaled it down. You talked about what are they going to do with the various shows to scale them down. He's got it down to a thin reed. That's his show. 6 of them in a day. It was the next day I was interviewing him. He said he apologized for being hoarse because he had taped 6 shows in a day.
Who does that? Who can do that? That's unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill, do you have an expected timeline on when you think we will hear what will happen with that Colbert slot?
I don't have a timeline because I think they're still figuring out what's happening at CBS. You know what I mean? Like, uh, what the new management's really going to expect. Um, but I would bet a lot there's not going to be any other kind of late night show. So if it's Byron Allen, it's not Byron Allen. It'll be like local news. Maybe they'll give it back to the
Back
stations,
to the affiliates.
something like that.
But do you think we're looking at like a January thing, or even like could this go all the way till April before we know what's replacing it?
I think it'll be. Well, I mean, he's going to be off the air. Oh, he's going to be off the air in May, right?
May, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, they may not decide to do anything in the summer, but by the fall, you would think they'd do something.
Okay.
So,
All right.
Economically, you would think that they would go to maybe back to like something like Later with Bob Costas, one person interview, something very cheap, no live audience, no band. But you can watch those shows on YouTube. Everybody has them. You can see these people. So that just doesn't make sense anymore. Why you would have that on network television? It's just everything's changed.
but I want to make a point because Taylor Tomlinson was working for them. They were perfectly happy to renew Taylor Thompson. They wanted to renew that show.
They invested a lot of money in her.
They made economic sense, that show. So they weren't abandoning late night at that point. That was not in their plan. And then she decided not to do it. And so now that goes away and they have Colbert standing alone, and whatever their talk about the money, whether how much of it is true or not. And Colbert was an uncomfortable situation for them politically. They made that move. But in theory, if a Taylor Tomlinson like thing existed, they might be interested. I mean, it seemed like they were interested in that. She was a star, a budding star, and they kind of saw that. And I think they should have seen that. And the format was whatever they wanted to make. They changed it, and they were playing with it. So I wouldn't say it's completely out of the realm of possibility that somebody there will come up with something if there's a performer that wants to do it. But as I said earlier, a lot of comics don't even want to do that anymore. And they had set it up for her. She did 2 days or something and then could go on the road. So I think the way it looks to me is like they just don't want to be bothered. So Byron Allen is the ultimate I don't want to be bothered.
That makes sense. The only thing I think about is that the midterms will be coming up in the fall next year, and will CBS want to have some sort of late night programming covering them? Because that's when people tend to tune in to late night TV. So
Yes, that only but given Ellison's basically prevailing views, you would think he would say, "No, I don't want to do that.
right.
I don't want to get mixed up with that because that's going to be ferocious. There'll be so much very potentially big news about manipulating voting and all that kind of thing that's going to be going on. It could get extremely ugly, and I have a feeling they're not interested in ugly, even if it's funny.
Fascinating to think about. Mark, you have your book, Love Johnny Carson, that's available now, celebrating Carson's 100th birthday. You're on a book tour, publicizing the book and promoting it. So, how's everything going with the book tour? And have you learned anything through all your promotion about the book?
I just can't believe how many people I talk to miss Johnny. I mean, I have to remind myself constantly the guy's been off the air for 33 years. It doesn't feel that way. The YouTube channel that Jeff Sotzing, Johnny's nephew, producer, it's like over 1 million subscribers. People just miss the guy, and it seems like he just went off the air the other day. Yeah, I'm going to be in Chicago at their broadcasting museum, broadcast of communications on the 6th, that Thursday night, and then I'm going to be in Nebraska, in Johnny's hometown of Norfolk, Nebraska. I'm going to be there on the 8th, that Saturday at 1:00 at the Elkhorn Museum, which has lots of Johnny's artifacts. So yeah, I've just been in New York. I did a book thing, just signing books, and it's just I feel like I put everything in that I wanted to. I mean, it was just a celebration of Johnny, and just a really, with his faults. I mean, he would talk about on the Tonight Show about his drinking and his being overly competitive. I put the faults in the book. But I think overall, the reason it's called Love Johnny Carson, to me at least, is the 400 plus people I talked to just would tell me, so many of them, I love Johnny Carson. And it was very surprising. And I think it was just surprising how many people I talked to that knew the man, that just, it was a different portrayal than a lot of the media for decades made him out to be.
Have you spoken to anybody on the street as you're doing book signings that have told you any interesting stories, or just like what's the reaction overall?
Yeah, I mean, people will constantly tell me stories where they either they met him, or I had somebody drive from Rhode Island to meet me in New York that listened to my podcast. He's like, I've listened 4 times to every podcast you've done, and all these people. But yeah, it's amazing to me. When I hear some of the stories that how Carson was in private, like there was somebody in Nebraska who just sent a note backstage to the Sahara Hotel when Johnny was performing. I'm from Nebraska, and Johnny's like, "Oh no, have them come back," and was just hanging out with them. Like he longed just for authenticity, and if somebody perceived somebody to be real and just not show business, he was really open. But just a lot of private stories of his kindness, which is reflected in the book. Him saving a comedian's life from drugs, and him secretly, donating all this money to people in need. I mean, his producer, Fred DeCordova, went broke and died, and Carson quietly sent $100,000 to Janet DeCordova, Fred's widow. I mean, it just seems from the theme in the book and what people have been telling me that they've met him, and is loyalty. Like that was the most important thing to Carson, was loyalty, and he was there for people, but he expected it in return. And when he didn't get that back, it broke his heart, and that's reflected in the book.
Bill, with it being Carson's 100th birthday, how do you reflect on his legacy as we wrap up our show here today?
You can argue he's the biggest star in the history of television. You really can, because it's 30 years, but it was 30 years that everybody in America probably saw him at least once. I mean, even if you didn't watch him, you certainly saw him. Everybody saw him. And in that was when television was huge. It was a completely full reach of America at his disposal. And so he spoke to everybody. And that can never happen again. It just won't ever happen again. So, and he was able to do it because he connected. Like, I was, the next generation, he was my father's generation, right? But I connected with him. He was able to be savvy what was going on. And, there was just an effectiveness in his comedy. I really felt like the other thing was he was an incredible comedian. Like he was able to be funny every night. That is so hard. That is just so hard. And even when the monologue was weak, he'd find ways to save it. And, I can't ever remember watching the show and being disappointed in his performance. That just didn't happen.
I agree. It's just so cool to get to talk about the guy, and happy birthday, Johnny Carson. So, Mark, Bill, this was an incredible conversation here today. I really appreciate both of you. And I think we covered almost every late night topic that went on in the last month. This is great.
You think there'll ever be another month like this?
I don't know. Well, hopefully there will be, so that we can have more great discussions. And
thank you, John. Thank you, Bill. This was fun.
Yeah, of course. So our plan is to be back here about once a month to talk through everything that's happening in late night to never miss anything that we have going on at Late Nighter, we invite you to visit our website, LateNighter.com, where we have stories every single day about everything that's happening in late night television. And of course, if you want to see Mark Malkoff's podcast that he does once a week, where he interviews great guests from the late night universe, subscribe to the Late Nighter podcast network feed, both on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Mark, you just had a great conversation with Roy Wood Jr. We got Chris Kattan coming up. So a great job this season on Inside Late Night.
Oh, thanks. It's been so much fun, and you've done a great job. I'm grateful.
I appreciate that. All right, Bill. All right, Mark. Thank you so much for being with us today. And for everyone here at Late Nighter, my name is Jon Schneider, and we will see you next time. Have a good one.